In this tutorial I will show you how to take your objects from this to this by using cavity wear and edge wear in Smudgr Pro. So both of these were created with the very old preset, but in this one I just removed the cavity wear, and here I also added some edge wear later. And I will show you how to really work these settings here in the wear menu. So to start off, when you've created something like this with a preset, it will always use live mode, and this means it's only visible in cycles rendered mode. So if I go back to viewport shading here, you can see that the cavity effect is not here, and there's also this one turned gray. That's something to do with edge wear. I will explain that later. But so you know, live mode, you need to be in cycles rendered mode. And there's also another thing to take into account here. If you're using optics by NVIDIA, for example for your denoising, you can see here that Blender currently doesn't support ambient occlusion nodes and bevel nodes yet in optics, and live mode uses these nodes. So if you see this message, this means you're using live mode for cavity, and optics doesn't support it yet. But the Blender developers are currently working on also adding this support for these two nodes, so probably will in the near future this will also work with optics, but so you know. And I will also show you in a bit how to bake, and baking always works if it's optics or if it's the material preview mode. When you bake these textures, it will always work. So let's start. I'm gonna select this object here. I should mention, by the way, these are models by Showcofer, Unix, really great models. But to simplify this tutorial, I just removed all the textures and just put a simple green material on there. So here in the wear menu, you can see two buttons to add cavity wear and edge wear. If you later forget some of parts of this tutorial, you can always press the checkbox here, the question mark, and you see everything I tell here also in text. So we're going to start with adding cavity wear. Then you need to choose here, are you going to go with live mode or bake mode? So I'm just going to start with live mode here. And as you can see already, there's an effect on here, but I always prefer to click preview influence map right away so we can really see what's going on. And as you can see, this calculates where other parts are really close to this surface. So even because these are very close to each other, it also calculates this area as a cavity. Well, if you move it further away, you can see that effect getting less and less. And you can see the effect being the most intense in this cavity right here, and also in these slots of this toaster. And all parts here that are colored white or light colored will both get this color that you put in here. It's overlaid on your original texture, so it's not purely this color, but it'll make it darker or lighter, right? And also changes the roughness to this value. So by default it's 0.5 roughness, but you should also take this into account if, for example, you have a very shiny object and suddenly it's not shiny at all anymore. That's because, of course, the roughness changed by this cavity wear effect. So let's say, for example, you like this effect here and here, but you don't want this here on the side because, well, it's not really realistic that there would be much dirt buildup in those areas. Well, then you can use this slider here to just make the dark areas darker in the image, and you just keep these areas white. Well, this is all changed to a more black color. And if we move this closer, of course, it will get whiter again. As you note here, if you want to take this even further, it goes up to 100, but you can type manually up to 199. So that way you can make this effect even more increased. So now to see how this effect looks in rendered mode, I will stop previewing. And as you can see, these areas got darker, here it got darker, and also in these edges around these buttons. And now we'll look if this effect is strong enough, or if you want it stronger, you can increase the multiplier here, for example, to a value of 2. For example, you can always take it like 20, very extreme values. But in this case, because it's overlaid, it kind of caps at a certain level. So you can't make it pure black in here, because that wouldn't be really realistic. I'm gonna keep it at 1 for now. If you would want to make it a lot darker, you can always change like this color to a darker color. So I'm gonna also add some edge wear real quick, just to show you it's a very similar process. You click on live mode, you start previewing it. You can see the edges are way too thick right now. I've already tested this on the other one. I found that the value of 0.001 works quite well. Oh, apparently it doesn't. Maybe it's not 0.001. Let's try something else. Yeah, more like this. And in these metallic effects, I always like, instead of having a black color, making it more of a white color, and also increasing the multiplier to like 5. You can see, for example, this edge just gets a little lighter effect, and this gives this effect of the metal paint being chipped away a little bit. If you think this is too subtle, you can of course change the edge width to something much bigger, and then you can really see the effect a lot more. Just for your preference, what you want. The last thing I'm going to show you is how to bake this. So you can also use it in, for example, Eevee, the material preview mode, or render it in optics. So we're just going to switch over here to baked. You'll see that your effect will disappear, but these values below, these are saved for you. And I always like to just start with a low value here, resolution of 1024. And for samples, it usually is enough, but we'll see. And it can take a long time, this baking, so especially if you're a large scene, it can take up to like several minutes. Usually it's less than a minute, but it also depends on your hardware, of course. So I'm just gonna fast forward it here for you. So now it's baked. Let's see in the preview. Yes, this is also something to note. These because of the baking and because of the amount of samples, the effect usually isn't exactly the same. So this boost value can be a bit too high when you bake it out. So just decrease it a little bit once you're done. And you can see here, this is the effect, of course, of low samples. But usually these kind of effects here, they're not really that distracting. Just by using the effect, it usually just adds something like a little bit of variation inside this dirt effect. So I usually like these lower values for the samples. But you can look for yourself if you want higher resolution or higher samples. And one last thing to note is you also need to pack this image. So when you go to another tab, it will look if you have any images that still need to be packed. You can just press the pack image button, and then it will be packed here. You see a message below, it will be packed inside your file. If you rather save it manually, you can just choose to don't pack here, and you can save these images manually and maybe edit them in Photoshop if you want. So that's that for this tutorial. Thank you for watching. There was one thing that I forgot to explain. It was why this turns gray. Well, that's a bit of an unfortunate effect of the live edgeware, because this uses the bevel node, and the bevel node this outputs, I think it's white instead of cavity wear, and the ambient occlusion node here, this outputs black, if I remember correctly. So that means that when you look in the viewport, then the edge effect is always here on the whole object, because it doesn't calculate. Usually there's like this little corner in the side that it's not put on. So that's really a negative effect of using live mode on edgeware. So it's always, if you want to use this and you find this distracting, it's better to just bake this effect out, or maybe keep it on bake like this until you render, and then turn it on. Then turn it on here in the last moment. So that's that for a little extra tip. Alright.